Hello YouTube. Today is the day we play with trash. There are many things you can make with trash. You could rebuild a loved one, perhaps a deceased pet, or an effigy of your father. But today, we're going to be making something much greater than anyone in your personal life could ever hope to be. We're making a small town made of trash for orcs to live inside of. Orcs are a much better paternal figure than whatever bullshit dad you actually have, and they're also much better than your bullshit son. They deserve a very nice home, made of garbage, and today we're going to make it for them. The first step is to find the rustiest sharp object you own and use it to cut a very bad circle. I used MDF hardboard here, but you can use whatever your favorite material to make a circle out of is. Just make sure to sand the edges down after and that the circle is bad. The next thing you're going to want to do is get some trash. I use a lot of glass bottles, which I like the look of, but they're sort of hard to glue down. Super glue doesn't make them stick very well. I just used Gorilla Glue and Milliput because it's what I had. Like most things in my life, I did not build this terrain to last or plan for the long term, but if you want to build a trash town that won't fall apart because you neglected its emotional needs, adhesive epoxy is going to create a much stronger bond. Also, very important to make sure your trash is clean. Wash it with the same soap you used to rinse out your son's filthy mouth. After the trash has been glued, I took a bunch of scraps of cardboard and cut them into jagged shapes to make the trash look less like normal trash and more like fantastical orc trash. I think it's kind of cute if it looks like trash still. You don't want to hide it completely, but you want to think a little bit about the silhouette. It'll naturally probably look like bottles and cans and shit no matter what, so try to disguise it as much as you can. Using plastic art and a hobby knife, I cut out a bunch of skulls and doodads to put everywhere. Orcs love doodads and small little decorative things will make your terrain look a lot better. Another thing I didn't do here, but would recommend to people who want to go the extra mile, is to make a bunch of custom banners for your terrain. I'm out of printer ink and currently too poor to afford more. That is literally the only reason why I don't have banners in this video. Banners used to be a big part of the orc aesthetic that kind of disappeared in the late 90s. I still think they're great. I'm gonna make a video about them in the future. But if you look around online, there's still a bunch of great templates out there for banner scanned from old white dwarfs and things like that. I'll link them in the video description. But yeah, they're great. They need to come back, and if you want to, you can also hand paint your own. I 3D printed a bunch of glyphs and extra stuff to put on the terrain. If you don't have access to a printer, you can just use whatever bits you have. But do use bits. They're good for defining scale and will make your trash less flat. I'm gonna upload all the files I made for this to my Patreon, and all the ones I used for this that I didn't make, I will put in the video description. I tried to make all the glyphs and stuff a variety of sizes for contrast. I also tried to add a lot of things like the teeth that expanded the silhouette of the trash itself instead of just being flat detail that rests on top. After you are satisfied with the shape of your trash, it's time to cover it in mud. I made my mud by mixing equal parts PVA glue, brown craft paint, and a whole bunch of sand. You might want to use a cheap brush for this part. It will probably fuck up your brush permanently. And after it all mixed together really well, I started globbing them on all over the base. It takes a pretty long time for this stuff to dry. I wasn't that precious about applying it. I just kind of did it sloppily and hastily like any self-respecting orc would. I also applied it to a bunch of the areas that felt too flat to me. After mud is dry, spray with Tamiya black spray primer. You can use whatever primer you want. I just like Tamiya because it's cheap and really good for the cost. After the primer was dry, I started stifling? I painted it brown. After trash is brown, apply a very thin coat of watered down orange over everywhere to make it look like rust. The orange acts like a wash basically, and after the rust wash dries, I applied a bunch of base coat colors. You want the rust to still show through though, so don't go over it completely. Between panels and stuff like that, I left the brown showing, and on a lot of the bottles, I decided not to base coat them at all. I feel like orcs would probably get tired of painting something this big after a while, and I did too. A lot of classic orc models rely on bright primary colors everywhere, which is what I was going for, but then I also wanted to add a lot of off-whites and things for contrast, so it didn't feel just like a colorful mess. And as you'll see later, I use a lot of enamels and things like that for weathering, and I think the weathering really ties together all those different bright colors. So if you are planning on weathering your model later, don't worry about it being too bright in the beginning, and if anything, you probably want a little bit brighter. After I was happy with the colors of all the bottles and stuff like that, I started freehanding some little white skulls and checkers in detail. Just like the skulls I made out of plastic card, adding freehand things helps break up the bigger surfaces that would look too boring otherwise. bits. If you don't want to freehand stuff, you could also use banners here instead. Adding more bits would work too. I eventually added the second mud layer. I didn't think it looked thick enough, and some areas were a little bit spotty. If you do this, don't worry about getting the mud on the bottles themselves. I feel like it adds character to it. Also, most orcs probably don't clean their trash very often. I dry brushed all the mud with some yellow color, but it doesn't actually look like this because the lighting in the shot is really bad. Followed by a light dry brush of Screaming Skull after. I was happy with how my trash was looking as a whole, but I felt like it was still kind of flat and could use some extra detail. So I decided to model a bunch of rivets and bolts in ZBrush, which is a 3D modeling software. If you don't have a printer, a lot of people do this by buying large cylinders of plastic card, then cutting that tube into small cylinders of plastic card. Here are those rivets printed. They're drying in the UV light. It looks very nice. I did 2 batches of rivets. The first one I tried painting individually like a fucking idiot, and then I realized you could just tape them to a big piece of cardboard and paint that instead. If you paint rivets, I would definitely just get a big piece of cardboard and tape them all to it and then dry brush that. Then peel them off after they're painted and glue them on. Painted all the glowy bits with a bright green color. I really like it when models look like Mountain Dew. I don't know why. Actually, there's a whole video coming on that soon, but we'll save that for then. Object source lighting is a great way to make everybody think that you're much better at painting than you actually are. Some people get super fancy with it and do a really good job at making realistic lighting on their model. But I know what me and a lot of other people do is literally just miss whatever you're spraying with the airbrush so that it like hits the sides of it. And then most importantly, create a gradient that fades from dark to light. For Rivets on Trash Town, I airbrushed them with a mid, very saturated green tone to start. I think I used moot green. Then I mixed that moot green with a little bit of Flash Gets Yellow. And with that color, I painted a tiny dot in the center. After that, I painted an even tinier dot of just Flash Gets Yellow. After that was dry, I used some watered down BL10 green and just went around the edges to create some dark lines. I'm drawing a million orc skulls at this point in my life, so I kind of just winged them. But if you haven't drawn a million orc skulls, I would recommend drawing a bunch on a sheet of paper first so that you have an idea of what you want to paint, and or drawing them in with pencil on the surface that you're painting first before you actually apply paint to it. That way you'll have a guide to go off of and won't be trying to paint and design at the same time. For most of the weathering, I used a mixture of odorless paint thinner and light rust wash from Ammo MIG. Actually, I don't know if Ammo's the company or MIG's the company or neither one is. I don't know why it's called that. And then I also used a lot of track wash by the same company. For more information on using enamel paints, check out my How to Paint an Orc Mecha Dread While Society Collapses Around You video that I did a couple months ago. If you want to develop a healthy relationship with your trash that you can sustain and nurture long term, just like with any relationship, make sure to apply 2 coats of matte varnish and never appreciate it until one day you accidentally break it while unpacking your trunk. I think we all learned a lot about trash and ourselves. Sorry, I'm kind of distracted now. I took a break from recording this video to pet a cat that I found outside, and now I'm thinking about if I should have adopted them. I also have a huge rash on my left hand from petting them for a long time. Actually, I guess that's the answer. The answer is no. If you live in Los Angeles and want to adopt an extremely friendly cat, please drive to the Glendale Galleria. The cat is very sociable and seems to love garbage just like me. If you make your own trash town, it would be very cool if you post them in the comments or in some capacity send them to me. Instagram's a good method too, and if you like the video, please consider subscribing or supporting me on Patreon. If you support me on Patreon, you will financially obligate me to make more of these. Guilt is the most effective motivational tool I know. Actually, probably spite, but then guilt after that. It's a very good tool. Yeah, I hope you build a trash town. Thanks for coming by. I'll have another one of these videos pretty soon. Goodbye.